Okay, welcome. Technical session number 25. Looks like we skipped a few. Just a reminder, we jump around on the technical sessions to kind of parallel that information up with Coursera and other stuff that we're doing so that you're learning the same things at the same time and not kind of jumping around and trying to learn multiple different things at any given time. So for this particular one, we're going to be focusing on a laptop hardware, how they are similar and different to desktops themselves. We're also going to be talking a little bit about the functions and components within the displays of a laptop. Also, understanding and installing and configuring laptop hardware and components. You have a couple brief videos where they walk through it and show a little bit of the inner workings of the laptops themselves. All right. Currently, the BSMs that we're going to be focusing on in this particular technical session is going to be communication, which is very critical because, as we've often stated, IT is a team sport. You are likely going to be working on a team of other individuals with varying strengths and weaknesses. And also, you may be working in a scenario where it is a 24-hour operation where you will be handing off things to teammates as you leave for the day, and they'll be handing off things to you. And this is where communication becomes critical, where you need to be able to quickly and effectively convey what is active on the boards right now, what the customer's expectations are, and what you have already done. A lot of this can be conveyed in notes, but there also needs to be a quick verbal debrief to the team member you're handing over your duties to as you are stepping out for the day. You don't want them blindsided by something later on in the day where a customer was anticipating something to be complete and either the delay was not conveyed to the customer that this won't be completed until the next day, or the urgency of it was not conveyed to your teammate in which they could prioritize it above other tickets. Also, maintaining a growth mindset. We're continually learning, and we continue to understand that we don't necessarily know everything in this area, but we want to learn what we can when we can and continue to grow and develop as a technician. All right. Next, or first, actually, we're going to be talking about different types of laptops you are likely to come across in your day-to-day operations. You have your traditional laptop, which is a small portable computer, much more similar to a desktop in functions, components, and hardware. They have a pretty wide range in cost and capability. But this, up till about a few years ago, I'd say 5 to 8 years, this was the most common with regards to portable. Oops. Then we moved on to notebooks, which are kind of similar to a laptop, but they don't have the integrated optical drive. They're generally slimmer, they weigh less, they're more portable, but they do not have as good of a cooling capacity, and the processing power is significantly lower than an actual laptop itself. Then we get into netbooks as opposed to a notebook, which is even smaller, lighter, predominantly built around web surfing, checking email, stuff like that. If you're not going to do any real heavy lifting, it's just something to kind of offer some convenience and functionality for people who don't really use computers heavily in their daily lives. One of the more common ones in the marketplace now, Chromebooks. They can look very similar. It's not exactly like a laptop, but run on a Linux-based Chrome operating system. Super fast for internet and streaming, and can run Android apps. They don't typically have a massive amount of storage on them. And there are some downfalls and pluses to each of these items depending on what you're needing to use them for. And then finally, we have the tablet PC hybrid, which has actually been around for quite some time. I think Toshiba had one of the first of them back in the early 2000s, where it essentially is a computer or a laptop that either the screen can flip around and lay down on the keyboard to where you actually have a tablet, or actually flip around behind it and you can use it like a tablet as well. But it is incorporated with the touch screen as well. I know many of you may be thinking about like the tablets and stuff where you would just essentially attach a keyboard. That actually falls under the strictly mobile devices. So that's slightly different than what we were talking about here. But those are rapidly becoming very popular and replacing PCs for many people in many ways, because again, the vast majority of people use PCs just for checking emails, surfing the web, shopping online, things like that. They're not necessarily using it for work or graphics design, things like that. It's going to require a lot more processing power and higher functionality. So it hits that base level of functionality for the average consumer. All right. Advantages of your laptop. It's very portable. So you can kind of just grab it, go whenever you need. There's no cables tethering you to a wall. Setup is usually pretty easy. They come equipped automatically with Wi-Fi options. They have airplane mode, Bluetooth, and GPS already built into them, which is really nice. Integrated input devices such as your touchpad, trackball, the pointer stick, which is usually there in between, was it F and G or G and H? And they have special function keys, a little FN key down on the bottom, which can give you like your 9 or your 10 key numerical pad, plus a variety of other options along the way. Some of them have a physical locking mechanism on the side. You have a little port where you can plug in a cable lock and actually secure the laptop with a physical lock, so somebody can't just walk off with it. Many have rotating and removable screens, and quality construction, I guess, is debatable depending on the manufacturer. Disadvantages. Costs of laptops are, significantly higher than a desktop itself. Desktops tend to have better performance. Which is comparable to the portability. So you're sacrificing computing power for portability, essentially. Expandability. You can do a lot of upgrades to a desktop as you see fit, so long as you have the ports and slots available. You can do a ton of upgrades. Laptops, not so much for the most part. Power, battery limits on the actual PC itself, as opposed to always being plugged in. I mean, it's nice being able to unplug and kind of walk away, but you're generally limited to about 2 hours of heavy use, depending. There's the drop hazard. Many people carry their laptops from room to room. They do it in kind of a unrecommended manner where they typically do the one-hand carry, kind of have that thumb on the top, and they just carry it from the corner from room to room. Causes the laptop itself to flex over time. That can cause breakages, disconnections, and problems internally with the boards because you're causing the whole computer itself to flex. And then one of the more obvious things, it's easier to lose them or have them stolen. All right. Questions so far?
Is a netbook a laptop?
It is under that family, but it is distinguished from a laptop, where a laptop is the bigger, more robust. They tend to have optical drives. They're more powerful. The netbook is very, very small in comparison to an actual laptop. It is typically more built for like web surfing, email, stuff like that. It is kind of a specialized version of a laptop.
Oh, okay. I feel like I've never
Kind,
seen it.
kind of like, like you have a desktop tower, which is that really big desktop, and then they'll have a mini PC, which will be, like a little, much smaller casing and stuff like that. It'll have a closer to like a micro ATX in there. So it's much smaller, has less capability, less upgrade potential, all that stuff. That's kind of the difference between a laptop and a netbook itself. But again, when you're buying a computer, you need to ask yourself, what exactly are you going to be using it for? Do I need a hardcore gaming PC with all the bells and whistles if I'm just occasionally going on to check my email and, read the news on the internet? No. I had that conversation with my father. He basically just goes on to pay bills, read his email, and maybe read the news a little bit. And he was like trying to buy this really souped up PC. And I'm like, you don't need that much. You just need this. And that's all you need. You're done. It's more than you'll ever use. So especially when talking to customers, they'll also appreciate it more if you're not trying to upsell them versus sell them what they need. So the next time they'll come back to you because they'll feel they're getting an honest opinion. Yes, Karen.
My question is, why are most places not wanting to deal with Chromebooks? Like, for example, when you're trying to work from home, I see a lot of the description is saying like you need an actual laptop, not a Chromebook. So my thing is I'm trying to differentiate between the two.
Well, a lot of it does come down to software compatibility. Most things are based off of Windows and Windows-based applications. And they do have some plugins for Mac OS. But the problem is this is a very stripped down Linux-based operating system, and not a lot of average consumers actually use Linux. So in a troubleshooting sense, the compatibility of what you're using versus what you're working with is probably the issue. I had that conversation with my brother this weekend. He wanted to get on a couple different applications. He showed up with a Chromebook, and I'm like, Chromebook, it doesn't work with it. I'm sorry. And he's like, well, it should work. It's a computer. And I'm like, yes, but the compatibility of the software you're running low, because he works on cars all the time. So he has like the diagnostics tools where you plug the computer into the car and, you get all that kind of stuff. So he has that stuff, but he wants to use it on his laptop. So he got a Chromebook, and just that software is not compatible with Chromebook because they don't operate with Linux. They prefer you only have like Windows, or I think in some cases they allowed Mac OS, but even that software wouldn't have worked with a Mac. So it's typically what it's coming down to.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right. Laptops versus desktop components. So both laptops and desktops have similar components. The differences tends to be in size and power. Like laptops, both laptops and desktops have motherboards. Although in desktops, the motherboards tend to be of a standard size and configuration. When you get into laptops, it tends to be proprietary to that manufacturer. So you can't take a Dell laptop motherboard and move it over to a Toshiba. It's based on whoever made it, how that motherboard is going to look. They're going to make it very specific in the cutouts to fit the other components they have in there, the way that they've designed it. So it is very, very much proprietary. Both the CPU, both laptops and desktops have CPUs. However, in a laptop, the CPU is soldered onto the motherboard. So it's not something you can change out like you can on a desktop. It's pretty much what you have is what you got. Operates on lower voltages and clock speeds, which allows for easier cooling. Both of them have heat sinks although they vary in size, where you have room in the desktop to have the larger heat sinks, which can allow for easier heat distribution. You don't necessarily have that benefit inside a laptop. It's much smaller heat sinks. So again, they have to run off lower voltages and clock speeds in order to accommodate for this. Now, memory or RAM. Both laptops and desktops have them. In laptops, though, they use SODIMMs, which is small outline, or microDIMMs. That is something that can be upgraded on laptops, and it usually is something pretty simple. It's usually they have a easily accessible panel that accesses just the RAM, and you can upgrade the RAM inside the laptop pretty readily or pretty easily. So that is an easy upgrade that you can do. Hard drives, physical drive size is a little different. Remember, we said they had the 3.5 for the desktops, and then you have the 2.5 in the laptops, but you can take that laptop one and put it in a desktop with an adapter. But the laptop, the size itself is the difference. Optical drives, again, this is a technology that's kind of going by the wayside. It's kind of being, slowly phased out. So even some of the more modern or recent actual laptops likely won't even have optical drives in them. And the majority of desktops nowadays don't either. So this is also something to consider. Also, the motherboard itself for a laptop may not be enough. So sometimes the motherboard is broken up into two different pieces. So you actually would have a motherboard and a daughter board. So there would actually be a secondary board inside the laptop that they call the daughter board that allows for added functionality when they cannot fit all the components they need onto the motherboard itself. So, but again, that will be proprietary to the manufacturer of that laptop itself. So yes, Clean. And then whoever was talking, I'll get right back to you. Clean.
Just the daughter board is plays the same effect as a riser card, or no?
No, it does not play the same effect as a riser card. It's just like as they were expanding the capability of it, they typically ran out of real estate on a motherboard. So they might do like the South Bridge stuff on the daughter board. So, I mean, I would say kind of, but the riser card allows you to make the additional add-ons with slot cards and stuff like that. But in this case, it was more from the manufacturing standpoint. So I guess kind of maybe, but not exactly. Yes, Stephen.
So is the daughter board attached to the motherboard? Is it
No, it's actually a separate board, but they will be attached through components, but it is actually a separate board. All right. So some specialized hardware that you'll come across with regards to laptops. We'll be talking about docking stations versus express cards, batteries, power adapters, cable locks, and biometric authentication are some common hardware you see working alongside laptops. All right, first, you have a docking station, which also you have another thing that's similar to it called a port replicator. Easy way to remember it is a docking station is something that it will lock down into, where a port replicator would be something where you are simply connecting to it. Oftentimes, more frequently now, you'll see port replicators through the USB-C technology, and it'll provide power, additional components, additional USB ports, and all the desktop setups that the docking station would provide, although it's not necessarily proprietary to that exact laptop make and model. Utilizing the USB-C, the port replicators work for a variety of types of computers. So in the IT world, these are a little more beneficial because you don't have to keep a multitude of different types around. You just keep one type, and so long as all your laptops have USB-C, you're good to go. All right. Now, on many docking stations from a security standpoint, there actually are locking capabilities. So you can lock the computer down to this docking station. So it actually is secured and cannot be taken away. What the docking station and the port replicators typically are for, say if you go home and you work from home, you may take your laptop home and do email or follow up on stuff from your house. But when you come to work, you like to have a full-size monitor, full-size keyboard, mouse, all that kind of fun stuff. This allows you an easy way to do that. So you come in, you just lock the laptop down into the docking station, and it operates almost like a desktop computer. It's plugged into a power source. You're using full-size keyboards, mouse, and monitors and stuff like that. Or if you have a multi-monitor setup at your office, it's a real easy setup. You either lock it down, or if you're using a port replicator, you just plug in that USB-C and you're off and running. So that's typically why it's used. And then at the end of the day, if you want to take your laptop home with you, you can unplug easily, take it home. And if you have a similar setup at the house, you can do that, or you can just operate off of it as a normal laptop. Yes, Jessica.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm following correctly. So the docking station itself, that piece in the picture to the lower right, brown background, that is the docking station, and basically it's like it just.
Well, this is more like a port replicator. Up here where you see the computer sitting on this piece, that is more like a docking station.
So when it's actually together, that's the station.
Yeah. And then you have a port replicator, which will hook up similar to this, but it'll typically be through a USB-C.
Okay, and then I guess the docking station, the main fashion of it is that it's portable. You can take it with you to work, and then you can move with it basically.
Well, typically you would leave the docking station at work. So the docking station allows you to just kind of come in with your laptop, and then you click your laptop down into that docking station, and it operates almost like a desktop at that point. You have your big monitor, your big keyboard, all that kind of fun stuff. And then when you're ready to leave for the day, you unhook your laptop from the docking station, and you can take your laptop home with you.
Okay, so there wouldn't already be like a desktop, already that you're adding to. It's just, that's what I'm a little confused about.
Well, this would be, okay, think of it like you wanted to have all these features. You wanted to have the keyboard, the mouse, the monitor, and then you obviously need power and internet. When you would come into work, if you didn't have a docking station, you would need to take a power cable and plug it in. You would take an internet cable, plug it in. Take a monitor cable, plug it in so you have the big monitor. Take your, 2 USBs from your keyboard and your mouse and plug those into your laptop, and then you would be able to work.
Gotcha.
So that's 5 or 6 cables versus just coming in and going click down onto a docking station. All that stuff's already hooked up.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay.
Hey, Kelly, Julian has a question in chat. Would that be hot swappable, or does it need to be turned off before you can disconnect?
It is hot swappable, because if you literally just eject, you can walk off with your laptop. That was how my coworker killed so many, was he literally just punched the button to eject the laptop and threw it into his bag. And so the laptop was still running as he drove home in that nice, fun, insulated bag and in Florida heat with no AC. And he cooked, I think it was like 3 or 4 laptops in like 18 months. So yeah, it is technically hot swappable. Yes, Stephen.
Are you able to put dual screens on any of the port replicator or the dock station?
You could do triple screens. However it's set up, you can do it, because the computer I had in my previous office, I had triple monitors at my previous office, and that was all done through a docking station.
Cool.
So yeah. Yes, Cynthia.
So the docking station is basically is it a hub? Would that be considered a hub? Because you're saying it's just one cable and then everything is connected to, oh, never mind. I just figured it out. Never mind.
So the
Got
port
it.
replicator.
No, you don't have to explain it. I got it. I didn't see. I had to switch my perception. So basically, if I got this correctly, the USB-C is usually connected with a USB-C, and then the ports that are on this docking station, all the monitor, the keyboard, the speakers, whatever else peripherals that are connected, will be connected to the actual docking station, like the
Yes.
different ports that on a docking station. I was just
Yeah,
trying to
and
figure
then
out the actual, what the cable was to connecting to the docking station and the laptop, but I got
this
it.
one appears like down here. This one appears to be just like a monitor replicator, because I mean, all it has is like audio visual stuff. So you have your DVI down here. You had your S video, your components, and then they had the fiber audio, all that stuff going through a VGA. So this right here isn't necessarily a good representation. Over here, this is, because you got your internet, your USBs, your video outputs, keyboard hookups, and then some more USB stuff, and then audio out on the sides. And that would be a port replicator. So that would be could be considered like a hub, but it's feeding all that stuff through the USB technology, USB-C, including power. So really nice technology. This up here is basically everything is hooked up to it. And then if you look on the bottom of your laptop, sometimes you see like a little metal bar that goes across near the back. And that's where the docking station itself is clicking down into it and feeding into all these ports.
Thank you. I got it.
No problem.
Finally. Okay, cool.
Yes, Rachel.
So I used to think of a docking station with a replicator as like home base or as anchor. And the portability is that you take it away, you take it home. But what I want to know, is it now automatic that the system knows that it's in its docking station? Like, do you have to set up a profile? Is that automatic now?
It's pretty well automated. Like
Okay.
it recognizes that that information is coming through. With regards to a docking station, with regards to a port replicator, you may have to set it up depending on the manufacturer. So go ahead, Stephen.
So is a port replicator more universal than a dock station? I feel like I see more like connections on a port replicator than the dock.
I would say yes, because if you look at docking stations are typically specific to the make and model, because all PCs are slightly different in shape, size, location of ports, all that kind of fun stuff. And for it to be able to lock down securely, it really depends on make and model. Now, port replicators are typically going in through the USB-C. Basically, any computer that has a USB-C would likely be able to talk to this port replicator. Questions so far? All right. All right, specialized hardware express cards. You have two basic sizes of them. They would typically go in on the side of the computers themselves. Again, this is kind of a legacy technology that is being phased out, but you may run into it occasionally. The standard which they use is called the PCMCIA, or Personal Computer Memory Card International Associations. They're also sometimes called the PCMCIA cards. They typically will add functionality to a computer that was not already there. It may be a network card. Say if the network card internally on your computer goes bad, this would be a way to kind of replace it. For wired or wireless networks, it could be added sound cards, FireWire controllers, USB controllers, memory adapters, TV tuners. There is quite a variety of different ones you can get to kind of add functionality to your laptop. They typically come in two basic sizes. As you can see here, they typically so like this port on the side can hold two cards itself, and they have these little buttons off to the side that will kind of eject the card if one is in use. So basically, remember, express card or PCMCIA is on the side of the laptop, typically little cards that you insert to add functionality like sound cards, NIC cards, USB controllers, things like that. All right. Batteries. So you have manufactured over the years, you've had different types of batteries to kind of allow for portability, recharging, fun stuff like that. Yes, Jessica.
I don't know if I should wait till you finish. I'm sorry if I'm a little early. You could hold off. But why do batteries die the way they die? I want the proper knowledge in how to maximize the lifespan of your laptop battery, the plugging in, plugging out, just that, because I've had to replace my batteries of laptops throughout the years of, just and for some reason I learned late in the game that, overcharging or something like that, and that it like supposedly kills the battery faster, where then when you do need to disconnect, the battery life is shorter. If you could explain that, what goes wrong there?
Well, we will get into that. We will get into that here in a little bit.
Okay, awesome.
And talk about it. And a lot of that comes down to the type of power supply you're using, the battery type. Newer batteries are a little bit better about it. Older batteries tend to develop what's called a memory. And then you, in order to extend that battery life, sometimes you have to do what's called exercising the battery. And, but that is needed much less. That is more common with like the NiCads. Lithiums are a little bit better. And then you have the nickel metal hybrid or hydride, depending on who you talk to, that are a little bit better. Again, it's like it's incremental improvements, but we will get into this here in just a little bit.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. So, like we just mentioned, the three most common types you'll come across: the nickel metal hybrid, the nickel cadmium or NiCads, and the lithium ion batteries. For the most part, lithium ion is the most common. It provides the highest energy density for its weight and has less hazardous materials issues. Although we're going to need replacements for the lithium ions, because I think the world lithium ion mines will be fully depleted by something like 2030. So it is not that far away. So currently working on trying to find a replacement for that particular material. All right. Other specialized hardware for laptops themselves are the power adapters that you typically see. Off to the right, you have the Apple power adapter, and then to the left, you have a normal Windows PC adapter, or typically used. You often have probably wondered, why do they have this big chunk right in the middle of the cord? Why do we have to have that thing just in the middle? Why couldn't it be at the plug? Why couldn't it be internalized into the computer? Well, this chunk here is kind of like your power supply internally in your computer. That converts your alternating current to your direct current. Almost, again, all the computers inside, or all the components inside a laptop, require direct current, where AC comes out of the walls. So this converts that from AC to DC. That is why there's that big chunk in the, in the middle of the cable on your laptops. If you're going to be plugging your laptop into, say, a cigarette lighter, or a power supply inside of a car where it's already providing DC, you'll notice that it doesn't necessarily need that chunk right there in the middle. Yes, Stephen.
Wait, which wire you said converts AC to DC?
This block that's in the middle of the wire here. So you have this little wire that goes to the computer, this wire goes to the wall, and then you have this block in the middle. That block is what does the conversion from AC to DC. It also allows to free up real estate inside of the laptop, which is so precious for that conversion itself. Now the Apple power adapters, notice it's a little different, has that little port off to the side as opposed to the pin that you stick into the port here. Apple for quite some time now has utilized a magnetic connector for its power supply. So you just get it close and it just clicks right in. And if you happen to get up and walk off without unplugging it, or you forget to, it just disconnects from the magnet, makes it a lot easier. Has a much lower propensity for damage with something like that. If you do that with the Dell, with one like this, there is a pretty high likelihood that it's just going to snatch that computer out of your hand, or it's going to damage the internal port on the computer itself. Yes, Jessica.
Could you, just to make sure I have a proper understanding, Mark mentioned in the chat, to remember the difference between converters and adapters. So I understand what we're looking at right now to be an adapter. I guess right now what I'm confused about is, okay, so what more so would be a converter versus an adapter?
Well, I mean, this is an adapter, but it also has a conversion. Like, it does operate as a converter too. More so what I believe Mark is mentioning is like when you have like a PS2 adapter that would go into a USB, it's specifically changing the pin layout of the signal so that it can be, used in a separate port. A converter would actually change the type of signal. So that would be like going from a fiber optic line where you're using light and then converting it so that it can be read over a coaxial cable, which is copper. So that is an actual converter versus an adapter, which is utilizing the same signal, but just changing the form factor of the pins, essentially.
Gotcha, thank you. And no worries, Mark, that's how I'm learning.
Okay.
All right, good questions. All right, security. The much beloved cable lock. So offices, you can use these to secure a laptop to a desk, making it much less likely that somebody is going to walk off with this thing. Granted, one of the more frequent things you'll hear me say is locks just keep honest people honest. So if a laptop is just sitting on a desk with nobody around and nothing securing it, somebody might be like, you know what, I've needed a new laptop, and might grab it and just walk off with it. Now, if it's sitting on a desk and it is secured by a metal cable, highly unlikely they're going to just kind of grab it and walk off with it. Now, is it foolproof? Absolutely. Nobody's gonna be able to do it. No, they can break off the corner of the laptop, damaging it to get it, although its resale value pretty much is destroyed at that point. Or they can use wire cutters, which isn't really inconspicuous if you see somebody walking around an office with wire cutters. So, your general assumption would be they're up to no good if they're doing that. So it's kind of one of those things, keeps honest people honest. It just an added security component. As we will talk about later when we get into security, security is a layered approach. You want to have multiple layers in order to protect your data and your systems. Yes, Stephen.
Is that lock going into the charger port?
No, there's an actual slot on the side of a laptop that is reinforced with metal into the frame that you would typically just stick this in, and it kind of twists and locks. It looks like a little T, and then when it goes in, it kind of like the end of it will kind of twist over, locking it in. So there's
Yeah,
an
you got
actual
one on your laptop. You got a laptop, you got one.
Yeah, every laptop has one. This one requires a key to unlock. So it has that little round key that will unlock it so that it will come out. And then this one actually is a combination lock.
I don't think I see it on the Chromebook.
I'd take a look. I'm pretty sure they might have them.
Maybe on the side or the back.
Would it be a circle or a square?
It's typically an oval.
An oval? Okay.
But you'll see several examples of this throughout this one and throughout the course. We'll repeatedly point it out to you, but say a high percentage of laptops, if not almost all, have a cable lock port on their sides or back. All right. Some specialized hardware that was creeping up a little bit more on laptops. I think they kind of fell off a little bit, but they might start rising back, are biometric authentication. On the right-hand side here, you can see one for a fingerprint scanner, and then they can use facial recognition on cameras as well. That has come a long way. Early renditions of it, you literally could bypass it with a photo of somebody. So if you just held up a photo of the person who owned that laptop, you could bypass it. So then they started making it to where you would need at least the 2 cameras so that they would require a kind of a 3-dimensional, and they would need a little bit of motion to make sure it was not a 2-dimensional image. But then you started running into problems of like how many pinpoints they were using to actually determine your face. So a close relative can unlock your phone, like your child or something like that. If they look similarly to you with regards to the, bone structure of the face or whatever, they can unlock phones that way. But each generation, it's getting a little more robust, a little more secure. But as we go into security, we will mention over and over and over again, you can have greater security or greater convenience, not both. So the more secure something is, the less convenient it becomes. I often use the example, I could, if I want my computer to be completely secure from any networking threats, I could completely unplug it, bury it in a metal box in the backyard, completely secure. I'm not going to get any malware doing something like that. However, it's not very convenient if I want to, go online and check my email or do things like that. So I'm giving up a whole lot of convenience for a lot of security there. So we have to find that balance. What are you willing to accept for the convenience that you like? The same thing with regards to your online presence, working with social medias, companies, and all that kind of stuff. How much security are you willing to get up to have the convenience of the products they're offering? So that is a constant balancing act we need to maintain. Yes, Stephen.
When you use the biometric authentication, is that privacy protected? Like, is your fingerprinted like in a database somewhere, like someone can find it?
I would like to be able to answer yes to that question, but the answer truly comes to who owns that company.
Gotcha.
Who's providing that software? Not to terrify people, but hey, let's get into this. So over in Europe, COVID tests were associated with your personal identification number, kind of similar to a social security number, right? So everybody's going to get the COVID test, and then they have to provide their identification number, all that kind of fun stuff just to get the test. And that's been going on for, about 18 months now. It's been kind of going. Well, the company that made those tests and was distributing them has now made a deal with another company to give all that DNA information to so that they could run studies on the DNA. So now you have your personally identifiable information locked with your DNA that they've been using for all these tests and now sold to a third party. So you have to pay attention to the terms of service of the stuff that they're doing. So I would like to say that it is a secure database that nobody else will get access to, but it depends on who owns the company. And then it's going to depend on who buys that company later. So, yes, Karen.
Well, I'm a crime scene buff. I used to like watching crime scene shows, and that's kind of like the ancestry.com.
Oh, yeah.
When you upload your DNA and then they can go through and find you through a close relative. So yeah, that's crazy.
Well, initially they wanted to just run it and get that information, but Ancestry said no. So they're like, no, we won't do that. So they're like, okay. So then they started submitting samples under a false name so they could narrow their pool and be like, okay, we know it was this family.
Yeah.
So but
it's a whole show dedicated to it called Bloodline Detectives, and it's crazy.
Well, and then here's the other fun part. That was recently purchased by Blackstone.
Oh my goodness.
So whatever deals you had with Ancestry do not carry over to the new company Blackstone. So that's where it is. You got to be careful. Once you put that kind of data out there, it's out there for good.
Yeah.
So, you know, with regards to that kind of stuff. So typically though, on biometrics like this, when we're talking about fingerprints and facial recognition, that's not really scanning your entire fingerprint. It's not like the Ancestry.com where you're giving them your DNA and they're mapping your DNA. This is a little bit different. On facial recognition, they're taking multiple points on your face and measuring the distance between them. And I believe early renditions of facial recognition only used like 8 points. So it was really easy to get an alternate match. The same thing on fingerprints. They're matching specific points on your fingerprint itself and the distance between those points. And that's how they're getting your fingerprint. That's why, like for forensics, they require up to like, I think it's like a 15-point match in order for that to be considered a viable match for, you know, using in court. These biometrics will probably use like anywhere from 12 to 30, depending on the robustness of the software or the age of the software itself. But it's not actually taking a picture and mapping your fingerprint itself. It's literally just taking points on it. So it's a little less of a risk utilizing something like that or the facial recognition on there than, say, you know, having to give a blood sample or something like that. Me personally, I reside on robust passwords and PINs. I do not set up fingerprint or facial recognition on any of my devices. But that's me personally. That's how I do it. So, any other questions? That was a great question, though, and a great add on there, Karen. All right. Yes. Mark and I highly recommend that book. If you have not read it, there's a few out there you should read. And 1984 is definitely one of them. All right. I actually have a shirt that has like 3 circles on it. One circle is 1984, one is Fahrenheit. Was it Fahrenheit 511 by Roddenberry, and then the other one is Brave New World, and all 3 circles intersect as arrows pointing to the center saying you are here.
Yeah, Fahrenheit 451.
451, excuse me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good.
So it has like all three of those books intersecting and pointing to the middle saying you are here. All right. All right, physical ports on the laptop itself. Many of these will look kind of familiar, though maybe slightly different. This is, I believe, a Mac right here. So you have that little horizontal rectangle right there. There's your cable lock on a Mac. Obviously, here is your optical drive, although, again, that is going by the wayside. There is a microphone and speaker port near the front for your 1/8 inch jack. You have your DC jack in the back for your power port, or if it is a Mac, it would be like a square, or excuse me, a little rectangle for the magnetic connection. You have your USBs. I think on this one, it gives you a single USB 2 and then 2 USB 3s. VGA port. I would say you almost never see that on a laptop at this point, maybe on the back of it, but that is extremely rare. It's usually an HDMI at this point, which is right here's your HDMI. Then you have, of course, your Ethernet or network port, and then you have your SD cards and a Magic Gate slot. All right. Questions so far? Are you asking me that, Steve, or are you asking your students or the other students?
My classmates.
I actually started reading those books after I got into Security Plus, and I was like, you know what? I keep hearing mention of these, so I went back and read them.
Yeah, those books were still fiction when I was in high school. But you can see if you read those books, from when they were written, they kind of prophetic about some of the things that we have going on now as far as technology and the abuses that go on, and who's in control of your information and why, and what they're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
use it for. So
Oh yeah, it's definitely highly recommend. I've even joked, because of Amazon's propensity for banning and burning books, was, get them in paper format. That way they're not edited when you get them. So yeah, there's a lot going on with regards to that kind of stuff. Next, here is specific to the Mac. It's some of the other ones still have the FireWire. Mac held on to the FireWire much longer than the Windows PCs did and laptops. So they still kind of embrace that technology a little bit longer. There's the Thunderbolt we had talked about earlier, which is the merging of what two technologies?
PCIe and video, right?
Well, PCIe, yes.
PCIe and
Hooligan's helping you out.
and display.
Display port. There you go. Very good, Robert. So, okay, Thunderbolt, which is the merger of those two technologies. Then you have your USB 3s. Then here has the SDXC card slot, which is kind of like added functionality. You have your headphone jack. There is the MagSafe, which is that power port we were talking about, which is magnetic. It is not a port that goes in. It literally just lays alongside it, held by the magnet. You have your common network card. There's the optical drive that is typically not there anymore. And then the cable lock, which they call the Kingston lock slot right there, which is a elongated oval on the side of a Mac. And I forget who was asking about class recordings from Friday, as we did not have a technical session. Those sessions weren't recorded. Those are mostly just in-group sessions with regards to the test and the labs. Is it a MacBook Air, Susan? Pro should have it. I would double check on them because a Pro should have it. Yeah, I've read that one. It is a struggle. It is a struggle. I'll give you that. It's funny. Is like I was saying, like when I really started getting into reading, I read about 5 books a week or so. And so I require myself to read something in classic literature. And then at least 2 things that educate me on something that I don't already know. And then typically I'll get into like at least one brain candy book, which is just like pure entertainment, and then start that cycle over again. All right, so display features and functionality, kind of continuing on. And as we've gotten into smaller and lighter screens, like with the advent of LCD and LEDs, OLEDs and stuff like that, devices became, or laptops became significantly more portable, and usable, especially now with the OLEDs making laptops extremely light and thin. But unfortunately, it is one of the major component costs of a laptop itself. I remember in the early days of laptop adoption, like common laptop adoption in the late 90s, early 2000s, if the screen broke on the laptop, it was basically just replace the whole thing. Because the cost of the screen itself would be like 80%, you know, and then installing it, you might actually be over the cost of a new laptop rather than just fixing that screen. So essentially you would want to hook it up to an alternate monitor, download all your stuff off of it, and then just get a new laptop. It's not as bad now, but it's still one of the highest contributing costs to the overall device. Next, there are multiple components inside the screen of the laptop itself. We talked about this a little bit. You had the screen itself, you have the digitizer, and then if it is a LED, or excuse me, LCD, you have the inverter in the screen itself. The Wi-Fi antenna will run up along the edge of the screen itself. So if your antenna is bad, you know, and you have to replace it, you're going to have to go into both the base of the laptop and the screen in order to get the connections and the antenna out of it as well. You have the webcam and microphone typically at the top also, all built in to the screen in one. And again, it's kind of amazing how much stuff they're able to fit in such a small package at this point. Questions so far? All right. Why don't we take a quick 5-minute break? And we will come back at 10:45 and finish up this and maybe get a little bit of asynchronous time before lunch to work on Coursera, things like that. And then I will also be getting with Lorraine and Venkata with regards to labs and other questions earlier presented. So we'll be getting up with you guys here after this presentation. All right. Working on the screen, most laptops typically have screen sizes from 10 to 17 inches. I have seen larger, typically on gaming laptops and things of that nature, but typically falls between that 10 to 17 inch range. They have an aspect ratio of 16:9 or 16:10. And your typical resolutions are XGA, WXGA, or WSXGA. Although we're starting to get a little bit more into the 4K with the broader adoption of OLEDs and LEDs. So some of this stuff is similar with respect to the display devices we were talking about earlier, your CCFLs for your backlights for LCDs. That was upgraded to LED backlights, which would have the lower power consumption, and you don't need to have the actual inverter in place. And then the two types of monitors that you will come across, you have the twisted pneumatic, which is cheaper, lower power consumption with a much faster response time, typically coveted by gamers. And then you have the IPS or in-plane switching, much better color representation, wider angle viewing, more expensive, and typical, more sought after by your average consumer if you're using these for things like streaming or whatnot. All right. OLEDs, which has the organic diodes, allows for better image quality, thinner screens, lower power consumption, and actually can bend the screens, although typically you will not see that on a laptop. But currently the way of the future with regards to displays. All right, the inverter on LCD backlights with fluorescent bulbs. We remember what they were used for. They're used to convert from DC back to AC because that's what the CCFL bulbs require. It has a high energy in consumption, high frequency energy, and it is not recommended to change the inverter on a laptop since it could be very dangerous. So typically if the inverter goes bad, you would replace the monitor assembly, or if under warranty, you would send it in for repair then. And again, LED and OLEDs do not require inverters. A digitizer. This is a device built into the screen or into the touchpads that can be written or drawn on. And the content will be converted from analog input to digital images. For instance, I have a digitizer that Avery keeps telling me I need to use, but I'll get to it a little later probably. So digitizer is highly coveted by artists, especially they have after manufacturer ones that you can buy and they can use the pins and stuff like that. So digital artists and stuff use these a lot, as well as instructors. But with touch screens and things like that, it is typically built into the screen itself. All right. Wi-Fi antenna. It runs up through the clamshell case to allow for better signal reception. It is to get the antenna higher and help improve the reception. And the wiring runs down the side of the displays through the hinge into the laptop into the wireless adapter on the motherboard itself. Questions so far? Yes, DW.
Do all touchscreens have a digitizer component? Because I think I saw some questions worded that way, or are there some touchscreens that don't utilize the digitizer?
That's a good question. I mean, for the nuance of that, I might have to look and see if there are examples where it is not, but predominantly, yes. because like that would be where you would do like signature pads and stuff like that, like on the early touch pads and stuff like that. They would actually have digitizers for that. They might have created a subclassification of it because now it takes into account pressure and all that stuff. So it is a lot more robust than it was even 5-6 years ago. So I'll have to look into that question to see if there is a specific example where they would separate those two, but typically that is the case with regards to touchscreens. The digitizer is considered to be part of the screen. All right. Webcams and microphones are pretty universal today with regards to laptops. It's typically an aftermarket thing for desktops, unless you're getting an all-in-one device. And most common placement of them is typically right above the display in the center of your screen so that our big tech overlords can get a good look at us while we're working on the computer. So highly recommend investing in a nice little slide to block out your camera. And as scarily enough, it is very easy to access it if you do not have your ports blocked on your network. They can slip in and get on your webcams pretty easily. So it is a common attack vector for hackers. So just to be aware. All right. See here, microphones can also be built into the bottom half of the clamshell as well. Yes, that is the same for microphones too. So the joke I often reference is like back in the 50s and 60s, they were joking that, you know, in the future, the government will have listening devices in every home in America so that they could monitor you and all of that stuff. Fast forward to 2020. Hey, listening device, please set a kitchen timer for 20 minutes. So trying to steal brownie recipes. Depends on what state you're in, Hunter. Perfect example, Mark. All right, guidelines for cleaning and maintaining an LCD display. Use a soft, dry cloth to clean the LCD itself. Do not use things like Windex, anything, because these harsh chemicals can strip the coatings on your screens, damaging them. You might start getting hazy appearance on them. So soft, dry cloth with regards to that, that should get about 99% of it. They do have some wipes that are specific for touchscreen and monitors so that they won't damage them, things like that. Yes, clean.
Possible that deoxidized water.
Do what?
Deoxidized water. Basically, I can't describe how it's made, but it's water that's been deoxidized. So there
Isn't that just hydrogen?
Yeah. So hear me out, because Dish Network sells these, and they sell the kits for about $25. But it's the safest thing ever. You buy one pack of these kits, and it lasts you for a year, and you can use it on your laptop, your screens, your glasses, and everything else between.
Okay.
That's the simplest plug, because it's the only thing out of this company that I truly enjoy.
Okay. Gotcha. So I'll have to look into that.
I mean, if Amazon sells it online, they do so, but it's deoxidized water.
Okay. Good tip. I will look into that. All right. So for your keyboards, for those of us who eat and drink at our computers, it's a big no-no. Not supposed to do it. Unfortunately, most people do. So to clean out all that Cheetos dust and crumbs and all that kind of stuff. They have, you typically will use compressed air, keyboard, or a dry cloth across the top of it. They also make vacuum cleaners that you can, little tiny vacuum cleaners that you can use to suck out all that debris. So that you can get as much out as possible. If you're the kind of person who does this quite a lot, like you take your laptop to the coffee shop, you have breakfast and a coffee and all that kind of fun stuff. They do make silicone covers that go over your keyboard that are a major lifesaver. It does not allow the crumbs or all that other stuff to get down in there. And all you got to do is peel it off and shake it and then put it right back on. Not necessarily the case in an enterprise environment. You're going to have people who spill their coffee on their keyboards, soda, all that kind of fun stuff. And that is a little bit harder to clean up. So typically with just crumbs and dust and debris, compressed air, or a small vacuum, they make vacuums specifically for it. They're pretty inexpensive. They have a USB attachment. You can clean a lot of that up. If it is getting extremely bad, you can actually remove individual keys and clean out the debris from underneath the keys. So the keyboard keys aren't sticking anymore. Otherwise, like typing an email, then eventually you hit the A button. It's just like, it doesn't quite stop. But that would be a way you have to do it. You have to remove the individual keys. But if that's happening to a client at a workplace, you'd probably swap out that keyboard and take the damaged keyboard back to your office to try to fix. Yes, Jessica.
I'm asking for a friend. So let's say there is something stuck underneath one of your key characters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's annoying because you gotta my friend told me it's annoying because they gotta go to the top of the key instead of like the middle of the key to like activate the key. So to confirm, my friend was gonna pop it off, but I didn't. I'm the friend. I was afraid I was gonna break it, so I won't break it if I like snap it, push. Like, how do you get it? Like, because I
mean, all the keyboards are a little different. So again, you look up the type of keyboard.
Mhm.
So you figure out the type of keyboard you have. It should have a serial number on it, and then you can consult your teammate Google, and do like key removal and replacement. And then so you can see that, and then that will allow you to get under the key. Typically, you just they kind of snap off, and then you can clean the debris from under it and snap them back on. But you do have to be careful because they have little clips on them, and if you break those clips, then you have to buy a new key to click it back down. So again, watch the video, see if it's like overly complicated. If it is, maybe if you can deal with it, deal with it. If it's not overly complicated, give it a shot. There's lots of little tools that you'll kind of acquire. Like this one's probably one of my favorites. It is a pry tool. And I use this thing for like so much. Like I actually bought like 20 of them because I have some in my tool bag. I keep some in the house, some in the car because I use them for all kinds of different stuff. They're great for like prying open electronics devices. I use it for, clay sculpting, things like that. Works really great. So that it has a multitude of uses. I even use it when I'm reading to follow the lines, much faster and stuff like that. But this would be a great tool for something like that. You can pick them up on Amazon dirt cheap. But it's just one of those things like you acquire over time. But always see if there's a video out there talking about it before you do the repair. Watch it a couple times and then kind of assess your skill level and say, I think I'm ready to tackle something like this. Or if it's something you can deal with, maybe wait a little bit.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So, but first look up the keyboard and then just look up key removal and replacement.
Keyboard, key removal, replacement. Got it.
Yeah. That will allow you to get the key off, clean from under it, and then replace it. Have you tried compressed air yet? You went on mute.
I did. I think like just the angle of where that special.
What is
code
under there is like the air is not pushing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Just figured I'd ask.
And now I'm curious to see what it is that got me too.
It could just be like dust built up over time. That's, you know, something along those lines. All right. So various troubleshooting issues you can have with laptops themselves. Black ring around the picture itself means you probably need to run it in higher resolution. Remember we said the optimal resolution for any monitor is its native resolution. If you're running it lower than that, you'll run an issue where you might get that black ring around it, where the display piece of it is much smaller. So you run it at a higher resolution and set display to fill entire screen. All this will be in your display settings in the laptop. Dead pixels, we talked about this. There's, you know, one of two ways you can handle it. You can either return it if it's still under warranty, or if not, just deal with it. If it's not really affecting your picture, you're still able to work around it. That's basically our two options with regards to that. Fuzzy text, either better glasses or run in a higher resolution. Enable clear type is another one, and then you would find all this in display properties, appearance, and effects, because that may have been adjusted over time. See here, computer randomly shuts off. Change the refresh rate, open MS config, and stop any services that may be taxing the system. So background applications, sometimes we think, you know, like, oh, we'll just have like, you know, 97 windows open on our web browser, and that's going to be completely okay. Unfortunately, each one of those, as they refresh, is taking up a little bit of memory. And if you overwhelm that, eventually your system crashes. So phones, it's very common as well. Apple and Android, you have typically tons of apps running in the background. When you open an app and then close it, it's typically not actually closing. It's just kind of running in the background in case you need it again sometime soon. So depending on the manufacturer you use, like with the Apples, you go from like the bottom left corner and swipe up towards the center, and it'll show you all the applications you have open, and you can close everything. You should probably do that about once a day or so. But similarly on laptops, you may have stuff running in the background that you need to shut down. Apple makes it kind of easy. Anything that's open and running in the dock at the bottom of the screen, it has all the little icons up. It has a little dot underneath each one that is open and running. So if you have too many things open and running, you can start powering some of that stuff down. A little bit harder with Windows sometimes, but they usually do a pretty good job putting it down in the bottom toolbar. All right. Black screen upon startup. Check the video card. You could probably start it up into BIOS and run it in safe mode, which means it won't turn on any of your drivers or any of that stuff. And you can go in and troubleshoot a little bit and then turn things on one at a time and see where the issue is coming in. But we will get into that a little bit more when we get into troubleshooting and things like that. So like, yeah, if you boot into a blank screen, reboot again into BIOS, it's depending on the model of the computer, could be hitting F2, F8, or escape as it's loading, and that'll kick you into the BIOS or the UEFI. I believe in test out, it's hit delete, isn't it? If I remember correctly.
It depends on what computer you're on. If you got a Windows computer, it's F2 to get to the BIOS.
Okay.
And what did we determine for Mac? I
Mac
can't
is
remember.
delete.
What was that?
Delete for Mac.
Delete.
Okay, it
Mac.
is delete for Mac. Yeah.
And just as you're booting, you just hit that repeatedly. Just keep hitting it and it'll kick you into the BIOS. And that's where like you'd boot it into safe mode, and safe mode is great for troubleshooting and trying to figure out what's going on with the computer because it won't load any of the additional drivers. It's literally just the bare minimum stuff to get you in, and then you can start trying to figure out what's wrong. All right. So built within them, most laptops have a recovery partition that can restore to factory settings. Nice, fun feature. If you get to the point in the laptop where it's just too far gone, or you're going to sell the laptop or hand it off to somebody, what have you, you can go into the recovery partition and reset everything to factory settings, making it a little safer to get rid of it. And I say a little bit safer because if you're giving it to somebody that you don't really know, you're going to want to take extra steps than just resetting the factory settings, because there are recovery techniques that can be used to pull all of your data back off of those machines. So it says it's erased, but it's not really. So, but if you're giving it to like, you know, like your mother or you know, a close friend or something like that, this should be good enough. So, all right.
Kelly,
Do what?
what would be other steps that you would take if you were selling it to a stranger?
There's like bleaching programs that can thoroughly wipe the drives, and then you would reinstall a fresh version of the OS on it. So what it's doing is like when you format a hard drive, basically it's telling the computer that it's okay to write over these sections, even though there's data still there. The data is still there. It hasn't changed. It hasn't been removed. It's still there. But it's just saying like, if new data comes in, you can write over it. Then you have wiping programs that will read and will write over the drive multiple times and just keep doing this in a random order. So it's near impossible forensically to recover that data. So, but we will get into proper destruction and disposal towards the end of 1002. We have a whole section on just that kind of stuff. All right. So diagnostic software can help configure your system's issues. You have built-in utility programs, online server diagnostic programs. Yes, Karen.
The forensic people hate Apple because of the
Yes.
inability to get into and retrieve data. So, you know, I'm referring back to my crime shows, but the forensic people at the police department hate Apple computers, Apple products, period.
Yes. Well, I mean, they're not as good as they used to be about stuff like that. They were pretty good about protecting people's data, but they have lightened up on that a lot as of late. But still better than Microsoft, who's just kind of like, here, you know, and some of the security issues for Apple, or excuse me, Microsoft, it's pretty bad. I mean, there's a program called Trinity, which you can put on a USB card and literally will let you bypass all the way up through Windows 10 any sign-in passwords. You literally just plug it in and it auto runs and kicks you right into the program. So, you know, and it is very easy to find said programs too. So let me see here. Anybody heard that, you know, the Windows diagnostics, you know, the troubleshooting diagnostics, they actually printed somebody released the code for it. You know, like Windows troubleshooting, you know, if there's a problem with it. It's pretty easy. It's just right here. Those of you who didn't catch it, it says, you know, print. So it tells you what it says, and it says it's looking for problems. And then it gives you a timer. It waits, you know, 20,000 milliseconds, and then it comes out and says unable to find issue. So if anybody's ever had a problem with the Windows computer, and every time you go to the Windows to troubleshoot it, it says looking for problem, and then it just says unable to fix issue. I'm sorry, I'll quit knocking on windows. There we go. All right. So next, model and serial numbers stamped on the bottom gives you manufacturer identification. Those come important if you're troubleshooting. Oftentimes, if you give that to the IT personnel, if they're doing remote service, then they can actually pull up that exact make and model, and they know all the eccentricities with it, how to fix it, and it should make it a lot easier. Yeah, I've never had an issue resolved by that, Hunter, which is why I laughed so hard when I saw this particular one for the script. All right. Upgrading or replacing memory on a laptop. This one's pretty quick, straightforward. So on the back of your or bottom of your laptop, this includes Apple. Well, the Apple laptops don't have that port, but they're all-in-ones do. They're iMacs too. So on the bottom of it, you can locate where the memory slot is. Typically, it's just 1 to 4 screws. Unscrew it. Obviously, set up your ESD protocols to protect, your computer. Open the cover as shown in the image. So here it is sitting with the open cover, and you would remove the existing RAM and insert a new module, being careful not to touch the board connectors themselves. And then you replace the cover and boot. Notice the changes automatically configured. Questions so far? Hard drives, a little more in depth. So you read the documentation. Just to be sure where the hard drive itself is located, because there's multiple places it can be. Some are very easy, where it's just a singular port on the back. Some of them, you may have to take the entire thing apart just to access it. So be sure you look up where it is, how to get to it, stuff like that. Make sure it's something you want to get into before you do it. And if it's something easy, like this one down here, where it's quite literally just a port opened up, and then you can disconnect and remove and you're good to go, then you may want to take it. If it's something where you're going to be taking the keyboard assembly and the whole top of the computer off, you may not want to really get into it. Yes, Jessica, I can go back real quick. Just let me know when you're ready. We good? All right. So read documentation. I encourage to watch a video of somebody do it. Make sure it's something you want to get into. Make sure there's not a lot of jump cuts in the videos, because unfortunately people will put up videos and they will edit past all the really frustrating parts or the really difficult parts and be like, you just pop the case off and then look, we have our hard drive in hand, skipping over all of the other stuff that it took to get that hard drive out. So watch the video, make sure there's not a lot of jump cuts, stuff like that, and just see if it's something that you feel you're up to or you feel you're not. Usually, if the video is well done, there's not much that you will see that you'll say, I can't do that. Once you're done with this course, a whole lot of things you'll just watch and be like, if the video is well done, that's why you watch a few of them. Be like, you know what? I can handle that. And then you get in there and you can do it. And the first time it's scary, but the more you work with it, the more confident you become. The thought of opening up a mobile device, like a phone, terrified me before I got in this class, just because of all the small pieces and how breakable all this stuff is, and like all that kind of stuff. Near the end of the program, the battery issues with Apple was going on, where they would give you the batteries to replace, and it was like $20 or something like that to get the new batteries. So I was upgrading the batteries in both my phone and my wife's phone. And because our phones were like 5-6 years old at that point. And I decided to give it a shot. I did it, so I went on mine. Mine went like textbook. I mean, it was just perfect. Went through it. Everything went back the way it was supposed to, fired it up. Everything was awesome. Decided to do my wife's after that, and not so textbook. So of course it went well on mine, not on hers. And so I had to take it apart, figure it out, put it back together, didn't work again. So the third time I go to take it apart, I literally have, the customer, my wife, standing over me, intently staring at me going, you better make this work. And what ended up having to happen is I ended up having to strip apart my work cell phone and take the screen from my work cell phone and put it on my wife's, and then take my wife's and put it on my work. And by then it worked, but it was just a lot of stress for the first time me, performing surgery on a mobile device. Now it's no sweat. Like this particular one, I'm like the third owner on this phone because, like my wife's cousin had it, then she had it, then I had it. And I've put 5 screens on this thing because 2 of them are drop prone and they don't make a OtterBox that covers this thing entirely. So I've literally put 5 screens on this one phone. So I'm a pro at it at this point. But long story short, the first couple times you do it, you're going to be really nervous, but then you're going to get a lot better at it. It's going to become second nature and you just kind of cruise through it. And you'll be willing to take on more and more complicated tasks. So back to the hard drive upgrade. Read your documentation, watch your videos if there's ones available, locate where the drive component is, and remove the current drive by whatever instructions they have. Maybe it's just a simple port sometimes. Otherwise, it may be removing the entire keyboard assembly or the entire back of it, unplugging the power and the data connectors, and then replacing everything in reverse order. And then you go into the BIOS after that, confirm all is good with that new drive and it's working, and then reinstall an operating system if necessary. Questions so far? All right. So replacing internal components, recognizing internal expansion slots. There are not many, and there are very few things that can be upgraded. So be cautious when proceeding with things like that. Wireless and video cards. The wireless cards, typical, video cards, rare, and other internal components as well. External components, pretty easy. Make sure you have the safely remove hardware icon if it is not hot swappable. Typically only your USBs are, although there are some USB peripherals that are not, and you need to shut them down and eject them before it is safe to remove them. So be careful to read the documentation on that so you do not inadvertently damage a peripheral. You have the PNP components, which stands for plug and play, also known as plug and pray, because they don't always work as we like them to. And they can simply be disconnected as they are typically hot swappable. All right, any questions so far? All right. Next. Tear down and rebuild. Each laptop is different. So this is, big caveat. So make sure you use manufacturer's documentation and, and or watching videos of people do this before you attempt, and read it thoroughly before you start. Just again, to make sure that your skill level is up to the task, and it's something that you want to undergo. Use the proper hand tools for laptops and mobile devices. They have fun little kits, kind of like this, that they sell pretty inexpensively. They are more geared towards mobile devices and laptops rather than actual desktop PCs. I picked up one of these really, really inexpensively, and it actually has become the most commonly used tool set I use in my entire house, just because of all the little electronic devices that kids have and all that stuff. For breaking down and repairing them, it's been, extremely helpful. Again, make sure it's non-magnetic with regards to, any of the tools you're using. Set up, organize, and document as you go. Take lots of pictures so you know where everything goes. Make sure, especially with laptops and mobile devices, to do screw mapping. Map how, where each screw goes as you take it out of the device, because they have different lengths. They have different thread counts. And and things like that. So, we want to make sure that we're not putting a long screw into a short screw hole, because you can damage components. You can crack and break these things relatively easily. So we got to be careful with that. Make sure you're using your ESD grounding, because it's very easy to damage components. But a lot of it is kind of similar to breaking down a desktop. You remove your expansion cards, your CDs, your DVDs, flash cards, USBs, and then you shut it down, disconnect the AC adapter, undock the battery if you were able to remove the battery. So if you're going to work inside of it, go ahead and remove the battery. Up until recently, a lot of them just had like a little clip that you pulled aside, you could pop the battery out. Now they're doing they've gone the way of Apple and kind of have everything kind of sealed inside the case, and there actually is multiple batteries inside there, so it's a little harder. But again, that's where the manufacturing documentation comes in handy. And then you follow the documentation for teardown, because some of them will make you go in through the keyboard, some will make you go in from behind, depending on what you're trying to do. Then you would rebuild working backwards through the documentation, boot to ensure proper connections were made, kind of similar to the desktop itself, power on and pray. All right. Now we have a fun little video to go along with things here. Stop. I forgot to share sound. Sharing is caring. Y'all hear it? And also notice that the person didn't do any kind of screw mapping. So one of two things are going on there. One, this person has opened up so many of these types of laptops, they just know the screw depth for each hole, or this particular manufacturer uses the exact same screw type for every single port on the exterior. Not all are like that. Especially if you start getting into tablets and phones and things like that. So he's asking, why do we have to use a secondary tool after we've removed all the screws? So we've pulled out almost a dozen screws, and then we have to use another tool that looks similar to this one. Why would we have to use another tool?
That's not what the question says.
Well, actually, it is. It just may be worded to where it doesn't go that way. So like, So even after removing all those screws, the tech still needs to use another tool. Why do you think why do you think they need to use another tool? It was just music in the video. It wasn't talking through it, Sibley. Yeah, so the other tool is essentially to get into the case, kind of help pop it open. And there are two kind of reasons for this. They may have additional clips kind of holding the casing around the laptop, and it's just added security. The other thing there may be a gasket around the entire rim of it to kind of help with moisture or water getting in, things like that. And you might have to kind of break that seal in order to kind of get it open. Then you have to remove the gasket and replace it. So it will depend on the type of laptop as to what will be there. But typically it's just little additional clips to kind of hold things in place. And then you can put the screws in after that. Quick question. What do we think is under here? What does that look like to us?
A fan?
And that is a fan. So what do we think would be under that?
The CPU.
The CPU. So not much different in many ways than the motherboards on a desktop. We still need that heatsink and that CPU hovering right, that fan on top of there. So
Wait, I thought the CPU was that little chip that he removed on the.
no, that was probably a network card.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, the CPU on a laptop is soldered into the motherboard.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So, but this big fan, which would be the biggest cooling unit on top of the motherboard itself, that would be where the CPU would be hiding. So why was the technician so careful when trying to remove the motherboard from the connection cables?
Does every laptop have a daughter board?
No.
Okay.
It is just a common feature you may run across. So it seems almost like a close break between wanting to make sure he did not damage the motherboard itself and to make sure he does not damage these small cables connected to the motherboard. Both are pretty viable answers to that question. When you're dealing with some of the connectors with regards to mobile devices, laptops, and things like that, they have very, very tiny pins and they are very easily bent. So you do not, if it doesn't fit, don't force it, because you can very easily bend these pins and then life gets a lot more difficult. Either trying to bend those pins back out or even trying to replace these cables, which can be an absolute nightmare on the internals of a laptop. Yeah, didn't look like he was being careful, but again, it was moving at much higher speed than normal. So right. Now, safe handling guidelines. Yes, DW, before we get into that.
I'm sorry. Can you go back on the video to the part right before he pulls out the motherboard? There was something that he took out before that, and I want you to tell us what that was. Okay, yeah, that.
What he's pulling out right now?
Yeah, no, that like those like copper, the little copper part that he takes out right before the motherboard. Is that are those pipes?
No, those are not pipes. I would have to look, but I would add a guess. I would say that might be an antenna for the Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay.
But
right,
no,
thanks.
I mean, I don't think that would be like pipes for like liquid cooling. That looks like that is, where it's connected. That is likely an antenna.
All right, thanks, Kevin.
Mm-hmm. All right, safe handling. I always love looking out into the gallery when going over this because you see a lot of people with guilty looks on their faces when we talk about this. Never, ever hold a laptop by the lid or screen when carrying it. Always carry a laptop with two hands so you don't cause the case to flex or bend or possibly break internal components. It shouldn't need to be said, but never immerse a laptop in liquid and protect it from inclement weather. They do have things like tough books, I think Toshiba made, that could handle like literally going underwater and all that stuff. They ended up selling them like to the military or whatever. But overall, they're not built for that kind of stuff. So you don't want to be out where it's raining. You don't want to spill things on them. They don't, typically they're not built for that kind of stuff. All right. If the laptop is not a touchscreen, avoid touching the screen. I know it looks pretty when you press on it and the colors kind of change and blend together, but that's causing damage to the laptop. So if it's not a touchscreen, don't touch it. I have to have this conversation with my 4-year-old because they climbs up on the entertainment center when like Netflix is on, and he's sitting there like hitting the screen trying to get his show to play because he thinks the big screen is a touch screen. So it's great to see, it's cute, but it's like, how many times before I have to replace that? So, you know, if it's not a touch screen, don't touch it. It also limits the amount of times you'll have to clean it if that's the case. Always use a case. You know, like they have laptop cases, or they have most backpacks now are built with a laptop sleeve in them at this point, which is really nice. Always use something like that when transporting it. Don't just sling it under your arm or throw it on the front seat of the car or whatever and let it just kind of rattle around in the car as you're driving through, you know, town. Always make sure it's in a case, you know, for better protection. And please make sure it's off before it goes into the case. Otherwise, it's like putting it in an oven, because those cases are insulated to protect it. It also holds in heat. All right, protect from overheating by keeping it on a flat surface. If you're going to be operating on the dining room table or something along those lines, do not put it on a placemat or a tablecloth or something like that, because that inhibits its ability to breathe and bring in air for cooling. Don't put it on your lap or a pillow or on your bed, because that blocks the air vents and it essentially just cooks the interior of that laptop and eventually will kill that laptop. Always close the laptop carefully from the center of the lid. Never slam shut, no matter how bad the email was. Never clean the laptop with anything scratchy. No Brillo pads. No Scotch sponges. You know, it says like safe for most surfaces. Laptop's not one of them. So nothing along those lines. Microfiber cloths, dry, general dusting. No cleaning solutions unless we're using deoxygenized water, aka hydrogen. Pro tip, don't leave your laptop on the couch. Yeah, you may sit on it, and that's bad. Or if you have pets, they may jump on it. All right. Comments, questions, concerns? How many of us realize we have been abusing our laptops? Yes, Karen.
So if like I'm sitting with my laptop, obviously like on my lap right now. So
Mhm.
how do I not, how do I allow it to get air? You know, if can I
Do
kind
you
of
have a large,
prop it up?
like, do you have a book? You can
A
set the
book?
book on your lap and then the laptop on the book, and that would allow
Okay.
it to
Yeah.
breathe.
Okay.
Hard surface or maybe a tray.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
like a
Okay.
TV tray is a really good one.
Mhm.
Okay. So no lap.
No lap.
All right.
And they should call it the no lap laptop. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yep, that is true. All right, so as we are closing this out, we should now be able to describe how a laptop functions similarly and differently than a desktop. Describe the functions and components within the display of a laptop, and understand installing and configuring laptop hardware components. With regards to configuring, it is rather similar to desktop, if not identical in most cases. Installation can be more complicated, but rely heavily on manufacturers' guides in order to know how to properly break down and rebuild. So with that,